Well, good morning. It is awesome to have you with us, whether you're here in the chapel or you're participating out in the atrium or the tent or watching from home. We've got a real special treat for you today. We're going to hear a firsthand account of a story of what it's like to get into the NFL, what that journey is like, and some lessons along the way. We're going to hear the story today of Brad Cousino. Many of you may know Brad because he's attended here for 25 years. His wife was our number one employee, first time Horizon hired anyone, was Miss Tammy. Many of you know Miss Tammy. We'll hear from her a little bit later. So let's give a warm Horizon welcome to one of our own to hear his journey, Brad Cousino. Brad, come on up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Chad, for inviting me to be able to come and tell my story. I've spoken to many audiences, none of which are more special than what I'm speaking to right now. Okay? How many people here have ever seen the movie Rudy? You know, that's the story of a walk-on Notre Dame. He basically is going through that whole thing, and he gets in for one play at the very end of his last game of his career or season. Carried off the field, by the way. And so what's the odds of someone being a walk-on and being able to be an all-star? What's the odds of that happening? Being a defensive MVP of the league for 2 years in a row and be 50 pounds underweight and 5 inches too short. It's not good. That was me. I ended up getting called from after the draft. They had drafted 442 football players, 2 basketball players, and I did not get drafted. As a result of that, my life was over, or at least I thought. I went to bed despondent. The next morning, I get a call, and the guy on the other line says, "Is Brad Cousino there?" They called me Cousino. And I said, "Well, that's me, sir." And he says, "Well, this is Paul Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals." Really? He said, Brad, you should have been drafted. You weren't drafted, but we think you got a lot of potential. We'd like for you to consider coming out on our team as a free agent. Now, free agent is that wasn't a good deal back then to be a free agent as compared to now. And then 2 hours later, I get another phone call from the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Chuck Noll. Yeah, the bad Pittsburgh Steelers. He wanted me to come out for their team, and he says, Brad, we think you got a lot of heart. Would you consider coming out? Well, I talked to some coaches that I had confidence in, and the long story short is I felt that I had a better chance to make the team with the Cincinnati Bengals. 1975, Paul Brown's last year as head coach. It was an opportunity to be able to go, and all Paul Brown promised me was this. He says, Brad, I promise you that I'll give you a fair shot. That's all I ever asked for was a fair shot. And he did, and he came through and he gave me a fair shot. Obviously, I'm here. I ended up making the team. And I've got notes about when I made the team and what was going on in my head. I remember being in the team meeting room, and Coach Brown is going through for the final cuts, and he says, and he specifically pointed to me and he says, and Brad Cousino is going to be our leader on special teams. And I made the Cincinnati Bengals team against all odds. I was a number 12 linebacker when they only keep 6, maybe 7. And so from there, I learned about what an NFL player is. And so we had our first chance to go down to the newly revised locker room at Riverfront Stadium. And I walk in and I look around, and then I see it. My name, Cousino, number 52, on an NFL locker. I could not believe it. It was like, I had tears in my eyes. I really did. I made it. And when you hear my story more, you'll understand why that was such a big deal. But then they gave a bunch of perks out. In each of our locker rooms, each of our lockers was a bag and I had 3 brand new pairs of cleats. 3! I had this big bag filled with all kinds of goodies, discounts from restaurants and from clothing stores, a custom-made suit discount. I'd never even had a suit, let alone a custom one. And through all of this, it was like, man, I started to recognize, boy, this is nice being an NFL player. So I'm sitting in a locker room, and I'm wondering, what am I doing here? Against all odds, how could I be an NFL player? And the only way to really explain that is to sort of start from the beginning, my beginning. And that happened when I get this slide, a vision in my head about what happened as I was growing up. So one believes things because one has been conditioned to believe them. My mom and dad came from a very dysfunctional home. Both of them were raised in a family with alcoholism and drugs and family abuse. Both of them, as a result, so I have a thing, hurt people really do hurt people. It's absolutely true. They don't know any other way. Mom and dad were raised in that dysfunctional home. Mom got pregnant with me when she was 15. My dad was 15, just going on 16, and they both had to drop out of high school as sophomores because of me. Dad lied to get a decent job, and the job that he got was at Libby Owens Ford Glass Factory. I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, Toledo was recognized as the glass capital of the world. My dad went there to work when he was 16. He lied, should have been 18, and ended up working in a place where the average temperature during the summer was 140 degrees inside the factory because of the big blast furnaces that's required to be able to make glass. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and because of her dysfunctional upbringing, she took out all of her pain on me. I had 2 brothers that were younger than me, one a year younger, one 4 years younger, but mom had it out for me. Here's a typical day growing up in my house. Pinching, slapping, choking, beatings, whipped with belts and sweeper cords. You ever see a Kirby sweeper cord? You know, the rubberized sweeper? That was one of the favorite ones that Mom did. Stabbed with forks sitting at a table, choked, slammed, almost choked to the point where I lost consciousness. And then Mom would yell and scream at me, vicious words. You're no good, you're a bum, you're a loser, you'll never amount to anything. You're worse than your father. And then she'd have tears welling up in her eyes, and she would literally, basically lose it as she's choking me, slamming my head against the wall, and she says, it's your fault, it's your fault. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be in this mess of a life. Now, I'm 9 years old. I don't understand what that means. But that's what I heard thousands of times. It's my fault. Growing up, I lied, cheated, and stole quite often. I went to St. John's Catholic Grade School. Right next to St. John's Catholic Grade School was a food town. I'd go into the food town and steal stuff. I only got caught once. But getting caught, it was embarrassing. I got caught stuffing a ham and cheese sandwich down my pants. They caught me, they called the police came, they put me in the squad car, they handcuffed me, hands behind my back, and on the way home, they basically gave me a stern talk. It says, you better straighten up because you're going to be in juvenile detention center, and they drove very slowly down my street, slowly. Sirens blaring. Come in front of my house, they stop, I get out of the car in handcuffs, my mom comes out the front door as all the other neighbors were out there, and she just freaked out because I just blew the cover of being the perfect family. See, everybody thought we were the perfect family. They didn't know all the problems that was going on. It was a deep, dark secret. Nobody knew. Mom volunteered at all the PTAs, all the things, and so that blessed it, and boy, did I get a beating that day, one of my worst beatings ever. And then when Dad came home, I got another beating because Mom kept telling him, you better do something with him. One of the things I remember a lot was I was always hustling jobs, always working. I had to. One, if I worked, I got spending money, and I was responsible for buying my own clothes, either that or wear the hand-me-downs from my cousins, and pay for the team fees, pay for mitts, pay for all those kinds of things. I had to pay for my high school. Toledo Central Catholic is where I ended up going. And the other benefit of having all these jobs was it kept me away from Mom. Mom, if I wasn't at home, I wasn't getting yelled at, wasn't getting beaten, wasn't getting any of that, so it became a double positive thing. So I wanted to go on to college. Now, nobody in my family had ever been to college. Nobody in my family up to my generation had ever graduated from an accredited high school. I was a good athlete, but I had issues. Here's my issues. They said I was too short, I was too slow, and I was too small. I don't know what I can do about that. I mean, I can't get any taller, but I had this heart of being able to always do great plays. All the colleges turned me down. I had turned down from over 25 different colleges for a scholarship. So as a result, I was a Rudy, a walk-on. And I went to that after writing a bunch of letters to the coaches begging for a scholarship. I found out that none of them had any scholarships, but I had one guy from Miami, Coach Bob Rubin, who said, we have an alumni that works in the Toledo area, and he thinks he can get you a decent paying job. And he did. And that job was, the road to Easy Street goes through the sewer. I worked in the sewers cleaning out all the crap underneath I-75 and 475 that goes around Toledo, cleaning out all the craps. Because when it rains, all that sludge and silt and everything goes down into the sewers, and every 4 to 5 years, you got to clean them. I was that guy. I still shudder at some of the things I saw and smelt in that sewer. Got paid $4.50 an hour, and that paid for my first quarter of school up at Miami University. Didn't know how I was going to pay for the second or third, but that pay got me in the door. One day, there was a guy that we called Kong, as in King Kong. He was a stud. He was the number one recruit of all the freshmen, and he basically had a bad day, went back to his dorm room, packed up all of his stuff, drove 200 miles back home, didn't tell a coach, didn't tell a trainer, and gave up a full scholarship. Who does that? I mean, I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to pay for the next meal, and he gave up a full scholarship. So that day in practice, they basically called, we need a middle guard in here. He played middle guard. Middle guards are typically 240, 250, 6'3" each glass. You know, one of those kind of guys? That wasn't me, but I jumped in there, and they said, Cousino, get out of there. You get killed. I was 192 at the time. I said, I can do this, coach. Get out of there. I wasn't going to leave. This was my chance. First play, they said, okay, we're coming at you. First play, I made the tackle. Second play, I made the tackle. Third play, being double teamed, I made the tackle. And the coaches, the offensive line coaches went nuts. They yelled and screamed at the offense. He said, this guy's a walk-on. You're not supposed to be allowing that to happen. And by the end of practice that day, I had made so many tackles and disrupted their team that they made the varsity offensive line run 10 extra 50-yard sprints in 93-degree heat. Now you can imagine how well-liked I was in that locker room. Not very. But it was my chance. They ended up moving me to middle guard on the scout team, and from there, I did pretty good. Everybody needs to have somebody come to them and help them. I had a coach, Coach Jerry Angelo. He eventually became the general manager for the Chicago Bears, but when I knew him, he was my coach, defensive line coach, and he would tell me, Brad, you could be great. With your work ethic and your desire and your ability, you could be a great one. And I started believing it. Through all of that, I asked the question, who was the great one in your life? There had to be somebody in your life. Most people in this room have been successful. They've had some success. Somebody reached out to you at a key time. Many of the times it's your parents. But I didn't have that option available to me. So where I got it from was coaches. Coaches became very important to me to learn how to become a man, to be learning how to know what to do, how to be a teammate. And I swear that Coach Jerry Angelo, Coach Bill Mallory, Coach Paul Brown, Coach Chuck Knoll made impacts in my life that are still with me today. Always give your best. If you got a job to do it and do it well. In football, for me, if you got the A gap, guess what? You better make sure that you got that A gap. Don't worry about anybody else. You just do your job. That was the mantra of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everybody do their job. Don't worry about anybody else, because if everybody does their job, we're going to do pretty good. Most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no longer any chance. Well, against all odds, I became the starting middle guard at Miami University as a freshman, spring ball, and then going into my sophomore year. I was the smallest lineman in the country. Played at 100. I was now 194 pounds. I gained 2 pounds, and made all the difference in the world. And the second game of as a starter was against the South Carolina Gamecocks, SEC. We're playing against them. And after that game, I was voted as the player of the week for all the country. I was the best defensive player of the week, Associated Press. I had 16 solo tackles. I had a blocked field goal that was really pivotal in winning the game. And then from there, I had 10 assists, and I had 4 quarterback sacks. That was in one game. As a sophomore, 192 pounds. Why do I tell you that? Sometimes somebody's whole season is those stats. And I was able to do that. So I made a name for myself, and now everybody's wondering, who is this guy? He came out of nowhere. And that was like that. So I happened to be on Miami's team during the glory years, 1973, 74, 75. We were undefeated. Had the longest winning streak in the country. I think it was in my last 2 years was 22-0-1. We were the number 1 defense in the nation, and I was, quote, the star of the defense. I made most valuable player of the league for 2 years in a row. My junior year, I beat out a guy named Jack Lambert for most valuable player in the league. And then I repeated again as a senior. I say these things because I was a walk-on. It shouldn't happen. You know what? They can't measure the heart. They can measure size, but they can't measure the heart. So I was hoping that I would be able to go to the NFL. That was a dream I had, that maybe I could be able to do it. Of course, all the scouts said, no way, too short, too slow, too small. Over and over, I heard that. So from there, I drafted 442 players, 2 basketball players, 2 guys that never played 1 down of college football. They got drafted, and I didn't. 17 rounds. That's when I get the call from Paul Brown. I get the call from there. So all I know is that as I was being in the NFL, I got traded to the Chicago Bears. I had a chip on my shoulder, and the long and short of it is this, is that I had a meeting with the coach. I wanted to play linebacker. He says, Cousino, there's no chance you're ever going to be our starting middle linebacker. Remember, we had a guy here named Dick Butkus. He's 245 pounds, eats glass. You know, like, that's not you. And on my way out, I said, Coach, either play me or trade me. And the next day, they waived me, cut me. And it wasn't a matter of a minute when my whole world came crashing down. Now, I had the same amount of money in my checking account. I drove the same car, was still dating Tammy, which I will tell you about. That was a defining moment in my life. Because for 4 years I propped up. I didn't need all that. I had success. I was a somebody. I was a big man on campus. I played in the NFL and was a star defensive player. Tammy I had met a couple of years earlier when I saw her, and she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And she was tiny and petite, and she had this red outfit on. She was a shakerette on the marching band's halftime deals, one of those things. I said, I got to find out more about her. But I was scared to death to ask her because I'd be rejected, and that's not fun. So but behind the scenes, I was working to get a blind date with her. I knew who I was going with. She didn't know who I was. And frankly, if she found out that I was a football player, she wouldn't have known who I was. She thought people were coming for the halftime show instead of the football game. So I tell you, as I was growing up, many times I prayed to God. I knew there was a God. I grew up in a Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. I knew there was a God. I just wasn't so sure that he had any time for me. Running the universe is a pretty big deal. He's got a lot of things on his plate. He doesn't have time for a loser like me. Remember, this is my mom telling me, no good, loser. And so as I was reaching out to God, I never heard from God, except as I was reading and studying and trying to figure out how to fix me, because I had holes in my heart, big holes in my heart. Wouldn't you, if you were slapped and hit and beat and knocked down and being told over and over again you'll never amount to anything? I had holes in my heart. So I ended up, as I was going through, is doing a lot of reading. And I come upon a term called sozo as I was doing my reading. Sozo is a Greek word, comes from like that, and it basically is, when I read that and found out what it meant, it was like, that's what I need. I need this. I need sozo in my life, but I didn't know how to get it. So here's what sozo means. In the Greek, in the word, you'll find it's 110 times found in the Bible, and it's many times where it talks about being saved, healed, delivered, made whole, transformed. It's the whole package deal. All those words is what sozo means. And when I read that, I said, that's what I need. I need sozo in my life. Didn't know how to get it. I found out that God sort of works in amazing ways. Here's how God worked in me. I call them God appointments. I reached out to God and nothing. I heard nothing. I had no voices, nothing in my head, but a God appointment. One of the first God appointments I had was going to the Kenwood Town Center, walking down the mall that I'd walked many, many times, and going past a Christian bookstore. I think it was the Berean. And I walked by, and for some reason, I felt compelled to turn around and go back into that store, out of the blue. I've never been in a Christian bookstore in my life. Walk in, find a lady in an aisle. She seemed like a happy lady, and so I just said to her, do you know any books that you could show me that I could learn more about God? She says, yeah, here's a good one. Bible. King James. She gave me a special Bible that she says, this is probably better for you. It's a living word, it's common everyday English. I take that book home and I couldn't stop reading it. Nobody told me I needed to read the Bible. Nobody told me I needed to go to church. No one told me to tithe. No one told me any of that. I just started reading that book. Now, I'm in the off season. I'm with the New York Giants. It's off season. So I'd get up in the morning at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and the next thing I know, it'd be 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I couldn't get enough. I read the book of John multiple times, and then the other Gospels, and then I started looking into other things in the Bible. And all of a sudden, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, I was being transformed without realizing it. And Tam mentioned God appointment number 2 is that I had this desire to keep reading and reading and reading. Not just reading a passage. I'm talking about reading. Not studying. Didn't get a concordance out and start studying. I just was reading. Something was happening to my heart. Tam mentioned it, and that was that she noticed that I stopped cussing and cursing and swearing. I had a bad habit. I was cussing and cursing all the time. That's the way I was raised. That's growing up in locker rooms. Guess what you do? You cuss and you curse. And so she noticed that I had stopped doing those things, and it was sort of like I didn't even think about it. Another God appointment was that I was transformed in weird ways. I come out of my apartment, the car's broken into, glass is smashed. I normally would have went berserk, went to the manager, screamed and yelled at them, said, you're going to fix this. I just was calm. I took my hands like this and I leaned on the car and I says, well, I hope whoever stole this listens to the tapes. I said, what's the matter with you, Brad? Somebody just broke into your car and you hope they listen to the tapes? Why? They were all Christian tapes, Christian music, Christian messages, things like that. By the way, they were 8-track tapes, just so that you know. And then I was being changed. God appointment number 5 was protecting Tammy from me. Tammy came from a wonderful home experience environment. Her mom and dad were, the best parents. When I met them, it was like I thought they were Leave It to Beaver, but this is the real deal. They were just amazing. She never heard swear words, never was told she was no good, never had any of those kinds of things. And so if I would have married her and not be changed, I would have crushed her. all the things that I grew up under, it would have eventually come out. And as much as I would love her, whatever, but you know what happens after a period of time in marriage? You revert back to your old self, and I would have crushed her. We would probably have destroyed our marriage because she wouldn't know how to deal with it. God changed me in such a way that I became a different person. Tammy became a Christian because she saw me change so much. She was already a moral person. She was already a churchgoer. She was doing all those things, but she didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And she was seeing what I was going through, and that affected her life and changed me in profound ways. Another God appointment that I wanted to get to real quick was I felt strongly that I needed to forgive my parents. Of all the things that they foisted on me, they were wrong. What they did was wrong, but they were just living out of their past. They were living out of their mom and dad not doing it right. And so, over a period of time, a couple of months, my heart softened. We had meetings with my parents, and I forgave them totally. And it really changed the dynamic. I removed a burden from me. How many times do you know people that have lived many, many years and are not forgiven a loved one, a cousin, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, whatever, and they went to their grave and it didn't happen because people didn't want to become transparent. And so I took care of that, and I'm so glad that I did because it made a difference. Made a difference to my family, but it made a difference in my heart. By the way, God sort of recommends that we forgive others. I noticed that as I was going through it. It wasn't a suggestion. It was like, you need to forgive. Why? Because I forgave you. On the next slide is sort of my points that I give to all the audiences I speak to. Many times they're not church audiences, but I would tell you these are important points. Priorities, I call them my truth nuggets of truth. I share with everybody that I admire. Everyone like this, I tell my kids and my grandkids this all the time. And you're now part of this group that I've shared this with. Priority number one, for a well-lived life, love God, love your family, and love others. A lot of people say, well, love God, you better love your family. That's your most important thing other than loving God. Love your family, love others. Point number two, always give your very best in everything you undertake. Don't cheat yourself by coasting. I had some of my grandkids here earlier. I got my son and daughter-in-law over here like this. It's one of the things I preach all the time is don't coast. Always give your best. I don't care if it's a job, it's a sport, whatever, give your best. If you give your best, then be a difference maker to all in your sphere of influence. Each of you have got a sphere of influence that nobody else has got the same sphere of influence with. You can make a difference in your job, in your people. Who are you a difference maker with? And if you're not, you need to think about that because there are a bunch of eyes watching you, and you could be that one point of light that makes a difference in their life by being like that. And that's really critical to be able to do that because it goes into the next point, finish life well. Would you all agree, especially the older ones, is time moving faster? Time's moving faster. You know what? I know that my body's gotten older. I couldn't go out on the football field. I play a lot of pickleball, but I cannot go out and do that because my body's getting older. But my spirit and soul are very young. My body, not so much. Think about that because what we've got to be able to do is finish life well, regardless of your age. Leave a legacy that benefits all those you care and trust about, all those that you really want to do, and guard your heart above all else. For it determines the course of your forever life. There's a part of you that is never going to stop existing. God made us, we got a body, we got a soul, we got a spirit, we got a heart. The body's not going to make it. But the rest of us, and it's going to live forever. That's the way that we've been made. So it's best that we know that and figure out what do we have to do to make sure that we are in the right area of our lives. I close with this. I'm holding my son. He's 5 days old, my first son. His name's Court. He's a baby in swaddling clothes. Tam trusted me for a few minutes to be with the baby alone, and I'm holding the baby out on my deck, and tears coming down my face. I was caught up with such emotion because I realized and how fearful I was that I didn't know how to be a good, loving dad. That Court needed me and I wanted to be for him. So I wanted to lead, I so wanted to lead my family to be a good leader. I didn't want to inflict any pain, emotional or physical, on my precious son or on Tammy. I was overcome with emotion and gratitude and felt compelled to reach out to God. Lord God, I love you and thank you for Court and Tammy and all you've blessed us with. Now, I'm 25 years old at the time, I believe. I ask that you change me in any way that I need to be changed. Please, please, please transform me to be the leader, husband, and good father that Court and my future kids need me to be. May your will be done in my life. I held Court close to me, and I whispered into his ear with conviction, Court, I promise you that I will learn how to be a good father. I promise I will love you and your mom unconditionally. And I promise that I will always be there for you and your mom. 25 years later, I get a card. I've gotten many cards from my kids. Cards, I write to them and they write to me, but this is a card, one of my many special ones, from Court, who's just left to be on his own. Now I realize that not everyone has been blessed with a loving parents and a wonderful family. I always knew that, but it was amazing how many people I have recently met who do not feel loved by their parents, and especially their fathers. I never took you for granted, but in the last year I have grown to appreciate you even more. You were and are the best father any kid could wish for. And you are the father I will aspire to be for my children. The bottom line is, God has blessed me with so much, but allowing me to be your son is one of the greatest blessings he has bestowed upon me. I love you, Dad, and I thank you for always being there. Love, Court. If you remember the last thing that I say is, I'll always be there for you. And I've gotten similar letters from my son here, my daughter-in-law, kids that were here before, that you could give me $1 million, I wouldn't take $1 million for these kinds of things. God changed me, folks. It wasn't me changing me. Tam is the best mom in the world, and I am very honored to have been asked to speak here, honored to be able to share story. Most of you have never known my real story. Thank you. Thank you for honoring Tammy in a few moments. Thank you.
Brad had asked us to do this song. He said it was very a pinnacle to a song that he listened to. Listening to there are so many voices that we hear and people that speak into our lives. And when he heard the right voice is why he wanted us to play this song for him.
Do to have the kind of faith it takes to climb out of this boat I'm in, onto to the crashing waves, to step out of my comfort zone, to the realm of the unknown where Jesus is, and he's holding out his hand. But the waves are calling out my name and they laugh at me, reminding me of all the times I've tried before and failed. The waves, they keep on telling me time and time again, boy, you'll never win. You'll never win. But the voice of truth tells me a different story. The voice of truth says do not be afraid. And the voice of truth says this is for my glory. Out of all the voices calling out to me, I will choose to listen and believe the voice of truth. Oh, what I would do to have the kind of strength it takes to stand before a giant, just a sling and a stone, surrounded by the sound of 1,000 warriors, shaking in their armor, wishing they did have the strength to stand. But the giant's calling out my name and he laughs at me, reminding me of all the times I've tried before and failed. The giant keeps on telling me time and time again, boy, you'll never win. You'll never win. But the voice of truth tells me a different story. The voice of truth says do not be afraid. And the voice of truth says this is for my glory. Out of all the voices calling out to me, I will choose to listen and believe the voice of truth. The stone was just the right size to put the giant in the ground, and the waves, they don't seem so high on top of them looking down. I was soared with the wings of eagles when I stop and listen to the sound of Jesus singing over me. But the voice of truth tells me a different story. The voice of truth says do not be afraid. And the voice of truth says this is for my glory. Out of all the voices calling out to me, I will choose to listen and believe. I will choose to listen and believe the voice of truth. I will listen and believe. I will listen and believe the voice of truth. I will listen and believe, 'cause Jesus, you are the voice of truth. And I will listen to you. You are.
Well, man, it's amazing when you hear Brad's story. There's so much more into it, how he and his parents actually became friends by the end of his life, how they became a follower of Jesus and began to see healing and transformation in their life because of that. If you're interested in more information about his story, his book is going to be available when you go out the door. On the right-hand side before you head out the door today, there'll be a book table. It's also got a summary of his life and his life story that he shared today. If you want to share that with someone, that'll be available today. But I'd like to invite both he and Tammy up one more time, if you guys want to come on back up on the stage. And most of you may not know what Miss Tammy does, but like I mentioned at the beginning, Miss Tammy is our first employee ever at our church. First ever. Long before I was here, Tammy was here. Tammy has been part of our children's department. She has trained 9 different children's pastors under her tutelage during that time. And she has been incredibly faithful. My kids were in the children's program that she was part of. Many of your kids, many of your grandkids are in the programs that she's been serving under for well past 20 years. So Tammy, I just want to thank you for your ministry and your heart, really. Because I've got to see you on staff, I've got to see you on stage, I've got to see you behind the scenes. I see you praying for people on the phone. The people who volunteered at our church are because of your shepherding and your loving and your kindness. You have been such an incredible example of compassion and faithfulness. You're always so joyful, and yet you've always challenged us. Are we connecting people? Are we helping people? Are we serving people? And one of those children's pastors that served under your tutelage was my daughter, who just transitioned recently, and she sent this note to you. She said, "When I think of you, the first thing I think of is the amazing woman you have with a heart of gold. I love watching you care for people. You remember the tiny details. You ask about people's lives. You have a way of showing everyone how important they are. I've seen you deliver dozens and dozens of meals to people over the years. I've seen you support people through challenging seasons and share God's love with hundreds, if not thousands, of children, teens, and adults. Serving alongside you is one of the highlights of my time at Horizon. And I know these are so many lives have been touched by your caring and sweet disposition. But besides that caring and sweet demeanor, as a woman who stands strong in her values and beliefs and shows what a humble walk with God can look like. I hope one day I grow up to love people like you do, stand by my beliefs like you do, and follow God like you do. I'm so excited for you to step into your next journey in life and pour that extra time into your loving family with that same passion, kindness that you've shown so many years." Tammy is going to be moving into retirement. She's still going to be here. She's still going to be serving in many ways, but she is going to be moving out of full-time work, and we just cannot be more thankful for her, what she has done, what she is doing, what she will do. But also we are honored. I'm personally honored. My daughter has been impacted by you directly and indirectly by all the ways that you've loved God so well and love people too. Can you give them a hand? And Brad wanted to share something as well.
In my book, under the dedication, I dedicate this to a number of different people, but this is what I said about Tammy. This was written a couple years ago. I am in awe that God chose you to be my wife of 45 plus years. You are my best friend, my true love, and in my opinion, the world's best mom, and now Gammy to our 11 grandkids. I love you, Gumpfuls, one of our key, pet words, and I'm so grateful that you are mom and dad to our 4 wonderful adult kids. You are indeed the super glue in our family. Our family dynamic would be vastly different without you. Tammy.
And following the service here, in just a moment, we're going to actually have a reception out in the tent to celebrate all those years of service. You want to come out and thank Tammy for ways she's impacted you directly or indirectly in your family. If you want to talk to Brad about his journey and how maybe you can see some sozo and some transformation in your life, what that looks like. Also, if you want to grab his book, it's out there by the front door. Thanks for being here today. We'll see you all next week. Well done, Tammy.